All right. Welcome to episode 133 of Ascension with A Course in Miracles. And this is what I've been doing for quite a few years, is sharing on Wednesdays, 12 o'clock Eastern time. And I may change things up a little bit. I'm not sure. There's some stuff coming up about doing some things a little bit differently. And I'm just sitting, listening to the guidance. But definitely this information is going to keep coming out. It just may be coming out in a different day, different time. I'm rearranging my life to fit the dynamics of being a grandmother, because my greatest guru, my greatest teacher is my grandson right now. And in a couple of months, I'm going to have a little granddaughter as well. So those children are the wisest. All children are the wisest beings on the planet. And I have become wise enough in my, 6 decades on this planet to know to listen to those little ones instead of the old crotchety ones who think they know it all, but are just stuck in their own mindsets. And that was the trajectory I was headed on when I thought I knew it all. And by gosh, I had to be right about everything that I knew. And only what I knew was correct. Everybody else was wrong. Oh, what a small world that was. But as I began this journey, it was about moving out of that small box I put myself in with. If what I knew was all that could be right, then it didn't leave a lot of room for curiosity. And humanity is going through basically a tearing down of the small box that we have all been complicit in co-creating, because this doesn't happen to us without our permission, at least at a soul level. At a soul level, we decide to incarnate, and we incarnate from our full glory as one with all that is. We come from where light is just pure light, and we descend. We choose to descend. We choose to come in. We're born absolutely whole, perfect, complete, magnificent, and plugged in with source. And then we get indoctrinated. We get indoctrinated little by little. We get pulled down into the lower realms of consciousness where we know so little, but we defend it with such fervor that we're willing to kill one another because of that. And we are operating down here. I know I was when I had my children who were born up here. And I did my damnedest to bring them down as low as I could, which is where I was. But fortunately, my first child, well, let me say the fortunately part a minute. My first child, I pulled her down as far as I could. And of course, she was resistant. My second child, fortunately, I had risen in consciousness enough to be curious, enough to not need to be right. And I parented so differently. Well, now as a grandmother, I know that the children are the teachers. They're the ones who really know, because they're the ones who are closest to the truth, because their minds haven't been indoctrinated. So as I continue to be involved in my daughter's life with my grandson, I mean, she just allows me to be so involved and to help in so many ways. It's absolutely amazing. And now there's another baby on the way, which means double the fun and double the work. But that's all good. So I am arranging things in my life so that they are my priority. And I love it. I love putting children first, because when I was a mom of little ones, they had to fit my schedule. They had to fit my life. It wasn't, I didn't, yes, you tailor your life around your kids because their sleep schedules and naps and eating and whatever activities. Yes, you do arrange to make them first in some ways, but you're training them to follow your footsteps, which means that your decisions, if mom says it's this way, it's this way. So that in essence, they're fitting into the mold that you're creating for them. So good things ahead, good things. And of course, this is in keeping with what we've been studying in A Course in Miracles. And we are in chapter 30. The section is called The New Beginning. This is in the text of the book that to me is the most important book on this planet. And there are many absolutely powerful, wonderful texts I just haven't found one that helps people see the ego, because that is the block. That is what keeps us from living as we were intended to live. Children come in plugged into the truth, to their soul. They know what it is that they are here to do, but then we get indoctrinated, and the mind begins to get filled with information. The Course in Miracles calls it misinformation, calls it wrong information, that tell us that we're not what we really are. We begin to forget that we're eternal. We begin to forget that we're all made of energy. We begin to forget that none of this is real. None of this is really solid, which of course quantum physics is helping us understand, but only a few know that. And the majority operate in that we are separate, we are solid, we are not eternal. So because we believe that we're separate and solid and not eternal, we have fear of death, we have fear of one another, that we're going to catch things from each other, that we're going to make each other sick. We don't tap into the truth of who we are, where all well-being exists. So our mind gets programmed, which is why we descend into a lower dimension. We basically have to make ourselves so dense where we know so little, but we defend it so fiercely, and we operate in the realm of being controlled. And A Course in Miracles shows us so clearly how to acknowledge, how to see, how to become aware and identify the part of us that has been programmed, that has been controlled, that gives us wrong thinking. And then it helps us understand right thinking. I grew up Catholic, and boy, my idea of God growing up, the more that I got pulled into what my grandparents and my mother and father knew, the church knew, the more my idea of God became so totally, completely wrong, completely opposite of the truth of God. So part of my awakening process in ascending, questioning things, that's what we're doing, is we're questioning and moving beyond limitation of thinking. I began to know more of the truth of God, that it's not a thing. It is a consciousness. It is the energy that everything is. It is the isness of all that is. And once I began to realize, well, God's not a man on a cloud, so it's not just male, and I began to open up that it's mother, father, and then I began to realize that it's energy. And then I began to realize that it's what everything is made of. It's a life force that pulses in everything, including in air. I began to create a totally different relationship with God. So not only did the Course in Miracles help me understand the way my ego mind got programmed, because it shows clearly the thinking that comes from the ego mind. It's fear, it's anger, it's judgment, it's jealousy, it's revenge, it's attack, it's lies, it's separation. And I began to put that in one column. And then I began to see what is true about God. It is loving, it is gentle, it is the same for all. There's no separation, there's equality, there's diversity, because it expresses in all different ways, and it respects all that is. And it is loving and compassionate and kind. And then when I began to see, well, God's ways, the new God that I was beginning to connect with, is what I was feeling inside of me. Every time I was kind, I was like, oh, that's what God feels like. Every time that I operated with the truth that said, I'm eternal, and I began to release fears, I felt that life force. It was like, oh, that's God in me. And that's how I began to feel the kingdom of heaven within. And as I identified thoughts that were judgmental and of separation and of fear and of revenge, I began to realize, oh, that's programming. Who did I learn that from? I could always identify where they came from. And the thoughts that were loving and kind, and I could feel inside, I was like, oh, so God's not on a cloud out there, this angry man. God is the kingdom within me. And I began to realize that if I stopped thinking with the ego, I would begin to feel the truth within me. I didn't have to think about being kind. I didn't have to think about being honest. It just happened because it's what I am. And that's what I noticed with my grandson. He says what's on his mind. He is honest as can be. He is kind. He is gentle. yes, there's a little bit of egoic, the aspect of the ego that is being built, my toys and my mommy, and that's happening. But his parents and I are working with him to begin to not choose to have that be his truth, but rather begin to open up that we're all connected, that sharing is a beautiful thing. So I am watching with him a process that begins to develop, and it happens when we take on a physical body and we think this is my body, we begin to think this is my stuff. It's unavoidable. But what is so crucial that is happening when one begins to understand the truth of who we are is that we show up differently. My daughter is such a different mother than I was to her. There's more consciousness there. There's more awareness that she doesn't want to pull her son to her level. She wants to ascend to his level as well, as do I. And it's just a beautiful thing to help guide my grandson in learning that selfishness it is not good, because this is where the foundational truth that Jesus taught us so long ago: treat others as you want to be treated. Treat your neighbor as you want to be treated. So we simply ask, right, or would you want somebody to do that to you? And the answer is always no, I don't want somebody to take a toy from me. I say, well, honey, you can't do that to others. So we're assisting him in being able to have a human experience. So he's in the world, but not of it. So just because he has a body, he doesn't think he's separate and separate and it's my stuff, so that he doesn't become attached to things. So there's a lot of training that is happening in raising him in alignment with the truth of who he is, because he has been born into a world that has density. The third dimension is a world where we have collective agreements, where we believe things that are not true. So he's been born into that energy. It's like a fish swimming in that water. Well, that fish is going to receive some of the contamination of that water versus water on the other side of the world. So there are so many things that are so necessary that we understand we have to work with when we are raising children, raising grandchildren. If we have a level of awareness, we have to understand that they're here to teach us as much as we are here to guide them. So it's not so much that we are teaching him things as much as we're guiding him to stay connected with truth and to begin at a very young age to release the limitations that have been taught through indoctrination. And Course in Miracles helped me understand that so clearly, which is why it's really the only book that I teach from, because it's the only book that I continue to study from. So I teach what I'm learning, and it is just such a wonderful, wonderful experience because I keep expanding. So last week we've been for quite a few weeks since December in section number 5, which talks about the only purpose that we have. And when I study this, and I go, well, that's the only purpose my grandson has. All of us have. That's the only one purpose, which is to realize that the world that we experience, and I'm going to read what it says here. The real world is the state of mind in which the only purpose of the world is seen to be forgiveness. So when we have fallen into the density of indoctrination and we operate in the 3D world, basically the ego takes over, we have one purpose, and that's to use the world to forgive ourselves for having forgotten the truth of who we are. So in essence, that's what I'm doing with my grandson, is I know that we're using the world so that he can go through the process of forgiving himself for forgetting, which is why I ask him when he is being selfish and he doesn't want to share a toy, would you like somebody to not share with you? And he says, no. And I'm like, well, remember, because he's not prepared to, he doesn't understand what forgiveness is, but we are forgiving ourselves for forgetting. So what I'm doing is helping him remember. So there'll be less things he's going to have to forgive himself for later on. Now, there'll be times, I'm not saying that he's going to absorb everything that I'm sharing with him that comes from A Course in Miracles, but the seeds are being planted. So his mind is accepting, because he hears it all the time, do unto others as you would like done unto you. Jesus taught us that 2,000 years ago. And the reason we do to others is because we understand that we're all one. So when you understand the metaphysics, so you understand the quantum physics, that God is energy and it's what we're all made of, then you're basically doing unto another what you're doing to yourself. That's why Jesus also said, love others, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So not only do we want to do unto others as we'd like them to do to us, but we're loving them by treating them as we want to be treated, because we are one with them. We're just doing to others what we want done to us, because we're all one. Once the mind accepts that as truth, then the actions of the body become congruent. So then it becomes easy to practice that, because the mind has been trained. So if the world's only purpose is for us to forgive it because we forgot and descended here, the 3D world is giving us an opportunity to see that it is time for a reversal. That's what humanity is in the middle of, a great awakening, because we're ascending. We're operating from a broader, more expansive way of seeing things. Instead of needing to be right, we stay curious and learn from one another. So the 3D world is where we learn our lessons about forgiveness, because we have been mean to one another. We have lied, we have cheated, we have believed things that were not true. So we're using it to forgive ourselves for forgetting. And we are moving into co-creating a new earth. And a new earth is basically people who are going to be on this planet, knowing that we're one, knowing that we're connected, doing what is loving. So the planet is going to be cleansed, because we're not going to pollute an aspect of self. If we are one with it, why would we pollute it? Well, we can't stop polluting the planet until we stop polluting our mind with misinformation. So all these things go hand in hand. And each and every one of us has to become the change we want to see in the world. That's why to go to the TV screen and hope things change over there on the other side of the world is like going to the mirror and wanting, if you go to the mirror and you have a frown, you want to turn the frown on the mirror into a smile. Well, you're not going to see a smile on the mirror until you begin to smile. So we got to stop trying to change the outside, because it's a reflection of what's happening inside. And whether it's my generation, my daughter's generation, or my grandchildren's generation, those of us who shift, we ascend to a higher dimension, meaning we become lighter. We are not bound by the heaviness of the ego's nonsense. We're not weighted down by the rules and regulations that we have been taught to think that we have to operate from. And as we cut those cords, we rise in consciousness. We lighten up. We go up higher like a hot air balloon when you cut the weights of the sandbags that hold it down. So humanity is ascending. That's the term that we use, ascending, but it's really the same as expanding, because it's all oneness that is moving out of contraction. So we studied that we only have one purpose. We're going to use the world to forgive ourselves for what we forgot. And, it's just the way that it's been happening. And it becomes really clear as we study this, that it tells us that this is helping us to remember the truth of who we are. And last week we read where not yet is heaven quite remembered, because as we begin to choose to be loving, we don't quite remember heaven. We don't quite remember that God is in us, but we begin the process of moving out of limitation. We begin to get comfortable with curiosity. As we become comfortable and question our thoughts, question everything, we begin to know that feels better to live in a more expanded state, but we don't quite remember heaven. And where is heaven? Where is the kingdom? It's within. That comes when you begin to realize that what God is what you are. And when we can, like Jesus taught, be comfortable with the statement, I and the Father, Mother, God are one, I and the Creator are one, then you are remembering heaven, because it's inside of you, because you create the place of peace instead of hell, which is created with the indoctrination that pulls us into the levels of limitation that humanity has gone down into. And that's why it's a mess. It's a shit show. when you watch how the world operates, when ego is what controls their decisions. But as we begin to help guide the younger children who come in already, they all come in at that high frequency, and we're not pulling them down to where we used to be because we're ascending in how we show up in the world, then of course the new earth is going to be, it is being created one person at a time. And it's going to take time for us to get to that level of reality for as a collective, because it takes one person at a time. And just as it took one person at a time to pull us down, it's going to take one person at a time to expand us. So in last week's lesson, it talks that at some point we're going to move beyond forgiveness because we won't have forgotten who we are. So as I help Ryder remember, he will be even more aware of these truths, and he will help his children remember from the get-go. I mean, and it'll be practice because I'm still learning. So I'm still having to do my own corrections, but he will know way more because he knows way more than I do. He's closer to source than I am. I'm just guiding him not to leave that space, but he's in the world that is going to pull him in certain directions where he is going to move into lower frequencies, but that's okay because he will hold a higher frequency overall than I did, because I didn't start this work until my 40s. My daughter didn't start this work until more like in her 20s, and Ryder starting it, and he's 2. You know, this is amazing. So the new earth that we all desire is being created one person at a time that makes a shift within. So it says in here that at some point we will go beyond forgiveness, because when everybody operates from a knowingness that we are one, and we operate from compassion and kindness and respect, because we know that everybody is just a reflection of self. We don't need to forgive ourselves because we won't do things that will require forgiving, because we will already operate from that higher frequency. And then it says in the paragraph from last week that fear drops away. And when fear drops away, you know that we have united in one purpose, and that one purpose is love, is where we know love shows up like kindness and gentleness and sharing and generosity and open-mindedness. It shows up. I mean, it's what love is. And love is not, we think that love is, oh, you fall in love with somebody and that's it. Love goes beyond the romantic kind of love that we have been indoctrinated into thinking is what love is. Love becomes the expression truly of acceptance, of compassion, of kindness, of curiosity. That's what love is when you embody all of those characteristics. You don't have to be that because you've got to be kind to the homeless person. You are that because you are the homeless person. You and them are one. And that's just the way that it is. So, of course, the more people remember the truth, do their forgiveness work, it tells us that there is hope for happiness in us. Because once we begin to feel, to touch the happiness that is possible, this is why our Constitution has something in it that was channeled, it was received, it was guided. And when you read it from this level of consciousness, it's clear. But of course, when you read it from this level of consciousness, it's a nice thing to want to achieve, but you don't understand that it's truth. And that is that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with the same inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, when we know that we have incarnated, we're using the life force to have a specific lifetime. Well, you appreciate life. You don't go around killing other people. You don't even go around killing animals, because you are connected with it. You are one with that life. Liberty, you are free. Everybody's free. You don't have to tell people to respect your, gender or pronouns or whatever. You live your life and you let others live. We're not controlling people to think like we do. We don't focus on colors, genders, different religions that people might follow, different paths, because you operate in liberty, in freedom. You respect that everybody is free to do whatever they will to do, because God gave us that. inalienable rights given to us by God. So liberty, everybody's free, but everybody appreciates and respects life. So nobody's killing each other. Nobody's hating on each other. So of course, happiness is the natural byproduct. That is the new earth that we are creating the foundation for right now. And it's going to take a few generations for us to live there, because as you see, if you open up the news, you see that the world is in crazy chaos right now, because what's coming to the surface is all of the ways that we have been indoctrinated into wrong thinking. So to return to right thinking, we've got to do the work and keep forgiving ourselves for our mistakes. And as we don't make those mistakes anymore, then we are co-creating heaven on earth collectively. But we got to go through the steps individually to get to that collective. That's why don't waste your time trying to change anybody outside of you. Do the work necessary so that you become the change you want to see in the world. And then what happens is you enlighten yourself, you are happy, joyful person as the world continues, and it's going to get really, really dark. I've been saying this for years. Keep your seatbelt on. Do not get out of your grounded truth. Stay grounded in what you know to be true. And if you believe this is true, then you're going to be kind to everybody. You're going to be gentle. You're going to be compassionate. You're going to be generous, because the world that we knew has to crumble for the new world to have space. So it's just like if you are taking an old building and you're going to put a new building in its place, you can't put the new one on top of the old one. It doesn't make sense. You got to demolish the old, then you have the land free and ready to build the new. Well, it's the same with our consciousness. We've got to see the old and begin to undo it. And we undo it by making a choice for the new. So anyways, this is, we those who understand what's happening are really glad. And it says in here, yet you will be glad. You will be glad, because every heart is being made ready to arise and go with God's plan. We left God's plan. We blocked ourselves from remembering God's plan when we bought into the BS, the belief systems, the bullshit that is of the ego, that is of separation. And because we didn't know any different, we didn't question it. We just got programmed. Everybody was born and moved down the schooling system and the indoctrination system. And where did we come? To think that we're right about everything and we know nothing. I mean, how arrogant is that? So we have to humble ourselves as we begin to know that we don't know anything. And I didn't know the truth about God. I didn't know the truth about well-being. I thought well-being came from a bottle. And I realized no well-being is in here. And I didn't know that we were being poisoned, the air, the food, the water. I've had to learn why that happens. Well, because when we operate from ego, one of the natural things that happens is we move into greed, because we're selfish. Mine, just no different than Ryder, my toy. So my money, my house, my country, my whatever. We've got to look at the same things. And if you don't train it when they're 2, well, they'll be 80 years old, president of the country, or 70 or whatever, thinking, or, Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum, thinking that he can run the world, that he gets to tell everybody what to do. It's an inverted pyramid where the one that goes to the lowest possible levels of separation, egoic selfishness, is the one who thinks that they rule the world. But they sell us this pyramid inverted as if somehow they're at the top and we're at the bottom, which is crazy. No, they're at the bottom pulling us down. And we've got to have enough sense to say, wait, this doesn't make sense. This is not loving. This is not gentle. This is not caring. This is not sharing. So we've got to move ourselves out of that insanity. And Course in Miracles is helping us every step of the way. So the new paragraph for today, which is paragraph 4, says that the final step is God's. Once we make the decision to shift, to begin the process of seeing the way the mind has been indoctrinated, to look at the ego beliefs, contrast them with God's truths, then the final step, once we have made the decision to forgive ourselves for forgetting, the final step is God's, because it is but God who could create a perfect son and share his fatherhood with him. Now, please remember that the Course in Miracles was written specifically for or was channeled specifically in this way for a woman who had been indoctrinated in religious beliefs, specifically Christians, even though she was actually Jewish. So she received Jewish information and Christian information, and it talked about the Father, the Son. It had all of those words. So that's what we're receiving. But if you translate it into what it really states, it says that the final step is God's. The final step is life. Life has the final step because there's no ending. So because it is but God who would create a perfect son, life force creates like itself. Everything is already perfect. You do not have to look at anything. When you move into the higher dimensions and you're operating from truth, everything is perfect. As a matter of fact, I was experiencing this yesterday where, I have a part-time job that I took at a restaurant, and it's just one of the funnest things that I do. Actually, I serve people. It's so much fun to serve from this level of consciousness. And I was feeling my oneness. I mean, I was getting all teary-eyed with the people that I was serving and the people that were cooking the food, and the food was coming, and I'm looking at the food, and I'm in such gratitude for those, the bread and the wheat, and the wheat that came from the fields. And I mean, I'm having this amazing experience in the middle of a crazy busy restaurant, but it's because the final step is God's. Once you make the choice to acknowledge the oneness with all that is, you don't have to do the last step. The last step is done because the essence of all that isness is within you, and you've given it permission. So of course it takes a step forward, and it's the final step out of insanity, because now you are committed to doing the will of that which created you, meaning that all of us are created equal, endowed by the creator, whether you call it God or life force or, whatever you want to call it. You want it to guide. You want it that knows about creation, that created everything, to be the one that guides you. So you allow yourself to listen to intuition, to tap in to that knowingness that is already activated within. You don't have to think for yourself anymore. God takes those steps because you give it permission to inform you. You say, not my will, but thine be done. You humble yourself and realize, you know what? My human mind only knows a little bit. I can't know everything. I can't know what 8 billion people know. Therefore, I only know 1/8 billionth of what can possibly be known. So there's a humbleness that happens when we allow the creative source to be what guides us. And it provides intuitive guidance. I've got a little dog outside that wants to get in here. Let me let her in before she breaks this down. Give me a quick second. Breaks the door down, because she will if we let her. All right, here we are. Now she's going to my doggie's food bowl to see if she can find any leftovers. So then it tells us here in the course, sentence number 2, no one outside of heaven knows how this can be. Meaning, and sorry if it's loud over there, it will stop soon. No one outside of heaven knows how this can be, for understanding this is heaven itself. Heaven, the kingdom of heaven is within. Heaven is a state that we experience within ourselves because we have come to know that that is where God is. God is not on a cloud somewhere. We were told that so we would easily give our power to the father, the mother, the teacher, the preacher, the government, the boss, the spouse outside of us. We were indoctrinated into thinking God is outside, because if we knew God is inside, we would know we don't have to bow down to anybody else. We're all the same. We're all equal. We don't need to necessarily know that we're all one, that there's only one energy, but there is something that happens when everybody is taught that they're all equal. So we've been indoctrinated into putting God outside, meaning we put authority outside of us. But when the authority of all that is within, and you become humble enough to accept that is what guides you, you experience heaven within. You experience God within, source within. You are attuned to the life force that does nothing but create goodness because it extends life. It doesn't take it away. It does not take it away. Now, we're not going to get into a conversation about death not being real, because to one who thinks that they're a separate body, well, the death experience feels extremely real. And it is experienced as such. So I'm not saying that we don't go through the death process. The body does. But the mind that is aware of the truth of what it is, that mind, which is what we're cultivating, this Course in Miracles is called a course in mind training. We are training the mind to know the truth so that the body can go through what the body goes through, but we don't suffer with the body's transition because the mind is clear that what we are is eternal life. So to be able to accept that is to live in heaven, is to be in heaven. You now are no longer needing to die and fear that you're going to go to hell or heaven. You know that heaven is the knowingness of truth, and you operate from that state all the time. So the body does what it does. Like bananas do what they do. If you don't eat it, it's going to eventually rot, and it goes back to where it came from, back to the earth, back to the soil. Bodies do the same thing. However, bodies or bananas, it doesn't matter. It's all energy. And when you know that it's all energy, you don't suffer when the banana rots and you didn't get to eat it, or the body dies, because you know it's just transforming into its next iteration. It's to its next expression, because life is eternal. And when you know that, you operate in heaven. Now heaven is brought to earth. You operate at this physical plane of separation, perceived separation, of limitation, life and death. Now you're in the world, but you're not of it. You're in it, operating in peace, joyful, experiencing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because everybody's doing the same thing. Now that is not only heaven on earth for you, it's heaven on earth for humanity. That's a planet that's operating at a high frequency that is absolutely amazing, powerful, beautiful. But then here's the thing. This states that no one outside of heaven knows how this can be. If your mind hasn't been trained to know the truth, you're outside of heaven. Heaven is out there, you're over here. You don't know those things. This is why I want my grandson to remember the truth of who he is. So as he continues to be in the world, he's not pulled into the indoctrinations that others are going to want to give him. Like the teacher is going to want him to look up to the teacher, like they know better. I don't want my grandson to look at anybody as if they're higher or lower than him. I want everybody to be looked at as equals, and they are respected because they are expressions of God also. Doesn't matter who they are, what they are, all becomes expressions of God. And if he believes that he knows something that maybe the teacher doesn't, that he doesn't fear speaking his mind. And when you operate in kindness and you know that we're all one, you state whatever it is that you want to state with confidence, never belittling another. So there's a lot of training that has to happen to operate in equality, to operate in kindness, in gentleness, but also as the Course in Miracles says, in defenselessness. You don't have to defend your position. If they don't agree with it, it's okay. So you don't have to enter into a war with anybody, but you also know the truth of who you are, and you stay in total and complete confidence to the point that, like Jesus did. So if you want to crucify me because you believe something other than what I know is true, you can. I'm not going to suffer because I'm not a body. And the resurrection is the expression of the eternalness that we all are. All of us, you can crucify my body. It's not going to kill the essence of who I am. The body is going to go back to the earth, ashes to ashes. So what? I'll have another incarnation and pick up another body if I want to. That's how free I am. My body is not what runs my life. My mind is aligned with the truth, and that gives me the freedom to live in this world, but not be of it. I don't operate in the fears that most people operate in. I used to, but I've been letting go of those fears. I let them go. I let them go as I climb myself, as I lighten up, as I enlighten myself and move in consciousness further and further and further away from that nonsense. So when you understand heaven, you're not looking for heaven anymore, because you realize that your awareness of the truth of what is what creates heaven. Heaven is a state of beingness where you are at peace, where you know that all of this is all a game that we are playing. That consciousness, God being one with all that is playing all the parts. It wants to experience what being Laina is, what being a blade of grass is, what being a German is, what being a Jew is, what being a Muslim is. It's playing all the roles. And here's the thing. In playing all the roles, it created us free. So we have the liberty, because all of us were, endowed by the Creator with the same inalienable rights, to choose to play a role and forget who we are. But then we're given all the information thousands of years ago. And before Jesus, there were other teachers all telling us, look at your mind. What are you believing? Because your beliefs create your reality. And if we think that we're separate and we buy into the nonsense of a few get to rule the many, then we give our power away and we have a world of discrepancies and the mess that we have today. But when you are here in the world and you're learning the truth of who you are, then you're going to operate in diversity, all being important components to the wonderful tapestry that humanity, that life on earth is all about. But we need the diversity for it to be interesting, because if everything was white, how would you even know you're white? If everything was white, if the trees and the people and everything was white, nobody could see anything other than itself. I mean, everything would be white. How would you know lines? There wouldn't be lines. Well, there could be lines, but they would be white. How boring would that be if everything was exactly the same? And so much of what the ego teaches us is it teaches us division, and then it blames us for not respecting divisions and shames us. So we never get to appreciate diversity because we are being shamed. First, we were, told that Blacks were not as good as whites, and we operated in slaveries and whatever we did with Blacks. And now we're told that the whites need to be shamed because they were the ones who oppressed the Blacks. But when you read history, you see that Blacks and whites all participated in the atrocities of slavery. And you, instead of blaming one side or the other, we went into, hey, we had liberty to choose to do those things. We did them then. And what's the purpose of the world? Forgiveness. We forgive each other for not knowing what we didn't know then. Today, we know. Today, we don't need to blame another side. Today, let's stop the indoctrination of always finding a scapegoat. Today, let's just own that we are powerful beings and move out of the victim mentality. Because when we don't no longer have the right one and the bad one, the good one and the villain, then we are all the same. So amazing things are coming. But for those amazing things to come, as within, so without, for me to have the life of peace that I have now, that I don't live in fear, I had to face my fears. I had to look at my indoctrinations. I experienced, as they call it, dark nights of the soul, which are never one dark night. It's never a few nights, and it's not of the soul. It's the dark years of the ego where you face how you participated in indoctrination, because number one, you chose to incarnate. So you got to start there. You're not of this world. You chose to be in this world. So you've got to own that you picked your family, you picked the circumstances, and people don't want to say, I never would have picked this crazy person as my mother or my father. Well, until you accept that you picked the circumstances you were born into because you were here to bring light to them, but you got indoctrinated. So you moved into darkness. You forgot the truth of who you are. We're forgiving ourselves for forgetting. That's the whole point of A Course in Miracles. We're forgiving ourselves for forgetting that we made this all up. And if you want to change it, you got to see what you no longer want. Because through the contrast, you decide, I don't want this old building. I want this new building. So we tear down the old building. We got to see, I don't want to operate in fear and in judgments and competition. It's not fun anymore. I don't want to operate with working my ass off at a job and paying taxes to go fund wars that kill people. I don't want to do that anymore. So you got to face it. This is why Carl Jung, the psychologist that taught us some important things about the shadow work that needs to be done, said that the only, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, but you can't find your light until you face your darkness. I had to face, oh my gosh, I did all these things, because in facing them, I became aware that I don't want them anymore. And until I acknowledge that I have them, I can't know what I prefer instead. So for me to then begin my journey with God, I had to see my journey with the ego. So many things are happening, are coming to the surface, because we are one, and we have all been complicit by turning our backs on some of the atrocities that have been done, in many cases funded by our own tax dollars. We worked our butts off to fund things that have harmed a lot of humanity. So we've got to face it and say, I don't want that anymore. But we can't be so high and mighty and think that we're separate. Well, I'm a spiritual person up here, and I only do love and light and unicorns and butterflies. I don't look at the darkness. Well, that's spiritual bypassing. That's a denial of the power that you have been using to contribute to the density of the third dimension called, planet Earth, as we've known it. And for it to change, you have to change. And for you to change, you have to face it and say, I don't want that anymore. So a lot of things have to happen here for all of us to experience this real world, this new earth that we desire. So then in sentence 3, it says, even the real world has a purpose still beneath creation and eternity. So this real world that we prefer still has a purpose. It's shining there for us to know that we prefer something else. But we can't have that real world while we live in a delusional world made up by psychopaths and crazy people, including our mothers and fathers and us, who bought into the story of separation, of better and haves and have-nots. And we have to move ourselves internally into oneness before we can accept that as one, we created what we don't want. Now let's create differently, but with awareness and no blaming, because we practiced forgiveness. You see how this works? It's just such, all of these pieces fall together when you really truly understand the importance of what the Course in Miracles is pointing to. Then he goes on to say, but fear is gone. Let me read the first sentence, the sentence number 3 again, and then the next one, so it makes more sense. Even the real world has a purpose still beneath creation and eternity, but fear is gone because its purpose is forgiven. It's forgiveness, not idolatry. Fear goes away when you're no longer scared of others and idolize the teacher, idolize the boss, idolize the president. When you're no longer looking outside of yourself, idolizing God on a cloud, and you come to know where all that is, now you're not in fear and you forget yourself for forgetting that you participated in creating this insanity, and now you're coming back to the truth of who you are. And so is heaven's son, meaning all of us, prepared to be ourselves and to remember that the Son of God knows everything his Father understands and understands it perfectly with him. Again, using Christian languages, let me translate. And heaven's son, you and me, are prepared. We have done the work to prepare ourselves. We see the darkness. We don't want it anymore. We have contrast. We know what God is. We know the truth. We know we're eternal. We know we're loving. We know we're creative. Then what happens is we begin to remember that the Son of God, each and every one of us, knows everything his Father understands. We know everything God, life force, understands because it's in us. We came to feel it within. We're no longer going outside of us for answers. We come to understand everything that God knows because it inspires us. And we understand it perfectly with it. because now we are guided intuitively from within. We know the truth and we now live from it. We have removed the obstacles to the presence of love that is God so that it can come through us. See, the Course tells us we don't have to learn what love is. We don't know what love is until we begin to feel this unconditional connection with all that is. Whether you feel it as you're serving somebody food and you know that every single item on that plate came specifically from places that are aspects of you playing those roles so that you could have the experience of having this meal, experiencing as if it's separate and the meal is being served to you, but knowing that it is one because you understand that all the life force is one, expressing in infinite ways. So how can you not do unto others what you would like done unto you when you know the oneness that we hold, the life force that is what we each are? This is why the Course for me has been instrumental in my liberation, because it showed me exactly what is of the ego. It shows me what creates all suffering. And it has shown me, it has pointed to what is truth. And as I began to allow myself to feel that truth, I began to know that that truth is in me. That is what God is. And I tap into the mind of God because there's only one mind and all minds are joined. And in that joining in a place of love, we are co-creating the new earth. So the old has to crumble, but it crumbles when you look at it and say, I don't want that anymore. By denying that it is there. Oh, I'm too love and light. I'm too spiritual to look at, that ugliness. You basically are saying it's existing. It is there, but I'm not going to look at it. And the Course teaches that the only good use of denial, instead of denying that it has power over you, that it can affect you, and denying your ability to look at it, what you do is you look at it and you say, I deny your power over me. But you have to humble yourself and acknowledge that you participated in all of the separation, participated in funding all of the atrocities, because it's all funded through tax dollars. How do you think they get the money to do the wars? I mean, it's easy to see what happens. How do you think starvation happens? We fund all of that. We participate in all of that. We decide that some are better than others. We agree that this is the most advanced country and, well, those poor people over there, and they don't matter. When we can look at what's happening in China and go, I don't want my brothers and sisters to be treated that way. Where am I contributing to that? Then you have to face the darkness and say, I have the power to say no to this. And you begin to unplug from the matrix. You begin to stop doing the things that continue that. For many of us, it happens through elections, through voting. But as if you're watching this, you probably are on the side that realizes that something's off with the elections. Maybe they haven't been honest. Then you want to do whatever it takes to make sure that those things get cleaned up. And then you begin to see, wow, there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. We got to clean up the election system so that our votes are accurate. Because when good people, begin to see what they don't want, they want to vote for people who won't do that. But if it continues to happen, it's because, well, wait a second. How can millions of people who don't want war continue to have wars? Well, because something's off in this whole election system. When you want to have a healthy body, when you want well-being, and you begin to face COVID gave us a wonderful opportunity to look at the greed of the medical establishment, the big pharma. And when you begin to look at those things, you got to face them and go, whoa, I did. Course in Miracles tells me I don't need to have any regrets, but I have one. And I may have to carry this one for a long time. But I vaccinated my children. I followed what my pediatricians told me. I never questioned. I never researched. I never looked at ingredients. I just did, as a good indoctrinated mom, what I was supposed to do. I took my child to the pediatrician, and they told me what a good pediatrician who was indoctrinated by a medical system that told them this is what you do, don't question it, did. And I carry that as still a regret that I contributed into the poisoning of these bodies. But at the same time, I know that they're not bodies. So it's a beautiful place to be in, where I have this, egoic regret that I poisoned my baby's bodies, and I contributed to that. I've contributed to humanity believing those things. But at the same time, I know that everybody's on their own journey. We're all equal, and everybody played the roles that they played to help us see what we need to see. So I conclude this by saying the Course has helped me understand my mind. It has trained me to see things differently. And that allows me to know that I can look at the darkness and I'm not scared of it. I bring my light to it. And just as when you put a match in a dark room and it shines and you can see things clearly, as each and every one of us turns on our light, we are each one match. But when those matches come together and we have an entire room filled with billions of matches, we can see things very clearly. The more darkness we see surfacing is because there are more matches that have been lit up. Thank you for being that light that we need in this world, so we can see collectively, clearly, hand in hand, the darkness. We forgive it because we forgot we were the light and we bought into being less than what we are. And now we can collectively begin to build a new earth, because the old one is crumbling, because we're no longer feeding it by denying that it has power over us. But that can only happen if we claim the power that we have within ourselves. And that is to accept that you and the Father, Mother, God, Spirit Source, Life Force, whatever the heck you want to call it, you can call it Buddha, Bambi, it doesn't matter. You have aligned with it and you accept it as your truth. And as your truth, you now operate from that same level that Buddha did, Jesus did, Gandhi did, Martin Luther King did. That's what the world needs now. More people willing to know the truth, be the truth, act as the truth. And from that place, respect that all too are the truth of God expressed. They either remember or they don't. That's it. If they don't, you forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. Nothing more needs to be said. Thank you so much for being with me today. If you like this episode, share it. And if you want to come back for more episodes, go to Laina Orlando on YouTube, and you'll find all other, 133 today, or the other 132 episodes are there. Thank you all so much. If you want to share anything that you got from today's transmission, by all means, unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.
Yes. I just wanted to say about shining your own light and recognizing as you awaken that your light is shining, brightly. And often I'm reminded when I walk into various places and I allow my light to shine. In some places, there's a lot of darkness, but the gift is every now and again, your light ignites someone else's light. And they then shine their light back at you. And it just, permeates, makes the brightness bigger in the area, and that sometimes brings someone else in who wants to shine their light because they see the activity. So it can be a rolling stone that gathers no moss, and gathers momentum. So yeah, that's great. That's all I have to say right now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, you don't need the box to light up a match. You can just, one match lights up another one. So thank you for sharing that. We really, it's amazing how much power we have to do so much good, but we have to be willing to not keep hiding our light under a bushel and just let it shine. So it's part of the work that we have to do to get comfortable with the truth that we know and walk about in this world that doesn't understand that with confidence. So thank you for sharing that. I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right, beloved. We will see you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Adios. Bye.
Bye-bye.